In a week that has seen the United Nations accuse transnational oil firms of fueling armed conflict in South Sudan to a tribunal granting Nigeria's main opposition permission to inspect voting materials used in last month's polls, this has been a week full of intrigue, and this is Africa Focus. Now, before jumping into the nuts and bolts of the program, take a look at the stories in store.
Hyacinth maize on Lake Victoria, plant spreads across Africa's Blue Heart. And in Mozambique, farmers encouraged to practice sustainable farming so as to stop deforestation.
I'm Lenny Rashid, and our sign language interpreter is Teresia Washira. Before we get into the main stories, let's take a look at the news that made the headlines around the continent.
Women leaders from Somalia have called on members of the federal parliament to approve a pending electoral reform bill that will enshrine the principle of a 30% gender quota in future national legislatures. This was discussed during a roundtable discussion in Mogadishu, Somalia. The forum was held under the theme Somali Women Unite for Inclusive Politics. It drew more than 30 women representing the federal parliament, civil society, the National Independent Electoral Commission, diaspora communities, political parties and academia. During the 2016 electoral process, female representation in the federal parliament rose from 14% in the outgoing legislature to 24%. However, the increase fell short of the 30% quota goal, which women leaders are planning to endorse for the 2020 elections. Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika said in a letter read out by his campaign manager on Sunday that he would call for a new elections if re-elected in April's presidential vote. Facing mass protests over his 20 years in power, Bouteflika also promised not to stand for re-election should he win the upcoming ballot. The announcement was read out by his campaign manager, Abdelghazani Zaalen, on Bouteflika's behalf, which was aimed at appeasing those who had taken to the streets to protest against the 82-year-old's plan to remain in office. The comments were Bouteflika's first since the biggest display of dissent in Algeria since the 2011 Arab Spring uprisings that unseated rulers in the neighboring countries. Faustin Archange Touadéra, the Central African Republic president, during a visit to the Vatican on Tuesday, stood by his country's peace deal a day after several militia groups rejected it and the new government. Less than a month after it was signed, the Central African Republic's peace agreement is under strain after 5 militia groups on Monday either pulled out or rejected the makeup of the new government. The peace pact, negotiated in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum before being signed in Bangui on February 6, brought together Touadéra and the leaders of the 14 armed groups who control most territory in the African nation. A new executive was formed on Sunday in accordance with the deal, which called for an inclusive government. The Vatican, in a statement, said Pope Francis and diplomats had encouraged engagement to promote peaceful coexistence and national reconciliation. President Macky Sall has pledged to do more and better than his first term and is reaching out to the opposition. He was officially declared winner of the February 24th vote after the Constitutional Council confirmed his re-election with 58% of votes. Sall had been tipped to win after a first term that propelled the West African country's economic growth to more than 6%, one of the highest on the continent. Commenting on the election results for the first time, Sall thanked the voters for choosing continuity and supporting his modernizing plans. He also addressed opposition candidates, calling for dialogue and unity. More than 66% of 6.7 million registered voters took part in the election. Sall said his swearing-in ceremony will take place on April 2nd. 2 white South African farmers were sentenced to up to 23 years in prison on Wednesday for the murder of a black youth who was thrown from a moving vehicle after being accused of stealing about $5 worth of sunflowers. The death of 15-year-old Matlomola Moseu in April 2017 caused outrage in a country where deep racial divisions persist 25 years after the end of white minority apartheid rule. Violent crime in South African farming communities has stirred racial tension and protests. Blacks comprise 80% of the 54 million population, but most of its wealth remains in the hands of whites, who make up to 8%. The two defendants were found guilty in October of murder, kidnapping, intimidation, theft and pointing of a firearm. Northwest High Court Judge Ronnie Hendricks said in his sentencing that Mosu's murder was not planned nor premeditated, but the accused acted recklessly. Violent protests erupted over the death of Mosu in the farming community of Kaligni, about 200 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg, with angry residents setting ablaze homes and businesses belonging to whites.
Kenyan fishermen in the Lake Victoria region are experiencing a decrease in the size of their catch. One reason for this is the invasion of a thick green carpet of water hyacinth in Kisumu Bay. This vegetation is blocking Kenya's main entry to Africa's largest lake, hitting the local economy hard as fishermen struggle to get out on the water.
Piled into their wooden boats, these fishermen are ready to set sail as the sun sets on Africa's largest lake. But once again, a thick green carpet of water hyacinth clogs Kisumu Bay, blocking the fishermen from reaching the deep waters to fish.
We are suffering because as we are unable to go out and fish, we are unable to get food.
Hyacinth is a floating aquatic plant native to South America. It has become a global freshwater menace after being transported worldwide. It is believed to have first reached Lake Victoria in the 1990s, floating down to the lake's western tributary, the Kagera. Since then, it has seriously hampered fishing boats and other vessels on Lake Victoria.
Many of our colleagues have had problems on the lake while fishing. They get stuck there. In the recent past, we've had cases where some fishermen got stuck on the lake, and the Kenyan government had to send a chopper to rescue them.
Lake Victoria is shared with Tanzania and Uganda, but on the Kenyan side alone, hyacinth covers roughly 5% of the water surface. The plant affects fish reproduction, and fishermen are seeing their catch evaporate.
In the Victoria, the fish was small because there are some weeds in the Victoria. So it forced some people to bring fish from China and some to bring from cages because the demand of fish was high, but the supply was low.
At the market in Kisumu, the gap between local demand and the lake supply is filled by frozen tilapia fillets imported from China. But these were banned by the president last year, a ban still to be enacted. According to experts, this will only worsen the supply-side deficit between Kenya's fish production of about 140,000 tons and the population's demand of about 500 tons.
Water hyacinth is indeed choking our water bodies. Gabon, an oil-rich country of about 270,000 square kilometers, has won plaudits for some of its ecological work. The country has 13 national parks constituting 11% of its land area, as well as 20 protected marine zones, a strong achievement by Central African standards. However, a mangrove forest on the coast of Gabon's capital, Libreville, is being destroyed to make way for urban development, which experts say is depriving the city of vital ecological reserve and weakening its shield against disasters such as storm surges.
This recently cleared land was once mangrove forest. The area floods in heavy rains, which makes it unsafe for construction. But in this suburb north of Libreville, despite the risks and often against laws protecting natural areas, new land is an opportunity for new buildings.
It's shocking because, of course, we should not be in a situation where people are building structures without permission in places that are unsafe. In this case, we're dealing with one or more people who are building on public land.
Gabon is home to half of the mangroves in the Gulf of Guinea, with the forests surrounding much of the capital. The trees play a key role in the fight against rising sea levels and the preservation of marine fauna, and environmentalists are concerned about ongoing deforestation.
The mangroves are disappearing because of urbanization. They're disappearing because of land speculation.
Experts recommend that any further expansion of the city should be inland, away from the protected wetlands on the coast.
Today, people are building on riverbeds and they're destroying wetlands such as mangrove forests. We're exposing ourselves to more and more natural disasters, and we risk ending up with conflict over land.
In Libreville, abandoned construction sites, or roads that have become rivers, are already a common sight. It's hoped chaotic urbanization can be slowed down to avoid provoking potentially catastrophic floods in the future.
Coming up after the break.
Simmering stock cube battle shows evolving West African tastes.
For this and much more, keep it Africa Focus. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa Focus. In case you just joined us, Teresia Washira is doing the honors on the sign language bit. Now, around the Gila National Nature Reserve in northern Mozambique, sustainable farming techniques are being promoted to limit the degradation of the country's precious forests, as traditional methods to prove to be only wasteful but are also bad for the environment. Currently, 10 to 15% of greenhouse gas emissions come from deforestation and forest degradation. The 2,800 square kilometer nature reserve seems to be reassuringly preserved, its hardwood treasure placed by Mozambique under legal protection.
Mozambique's Gila National Reserve is slowly dying. Its 2,800 square kilometers of biodiversity are being put at risk by illegal logging, but mainly the age-old use of slash-and-burn agriculture, a farming method which local populations living in the buffer zone of the reserve depend on to create new fields. To combat this ecologically destructive method of creating new fields, a French NGO is training farmers to increase soil fertility through more sustainable agricultural practices.
Our goal is to make sure farmers cultivate the same field for as long as possible. Here, for example, the same farmer has cultivated the same field for 4 years.
But slash-and-burn farming isn't the only threat to the forest of Miombo. The production of coal is eating away the forest while spitting out carbon dioxide emissions harmful to the environment. Here, coal workers are learning to create new ovens that use less trees but produce more highly quality coal.
Thanks to this new technique, we can produce up to 6 or 7 sacks of coal each time, whereas before we would only manage to produce 2 or 3.
The Gila National Reserve now wants to commercialize its effort to fight deforestation by marketing carbon credits. The scheme allows carbon dioxide emitters to buy credits in order to reduce their emissions while supporting environmental projects in developing countries.
We managed to reduce the annual deforestation rate in the buffer zone of the reserve. That is, greenhouse gas emissions have been avoided thanks to the alternatives put in place.
These efforts have reduced emissions by about 300,000 tons of carbon in 5 years. Each non-emitted ton of carbon dioxide equals 1 carbon credit, the sale of which is expected to generate between $2 and $3 million that could help finance the preservation of the forest and more sustainable developments.
Bludgeoned to death before being skinned in backyards and clandestine slaughterhouses, South Africa's donkeys are in the grip of a brutal, illegal call spurred by the demand for Chinese traditional medicine. Now, the country is considering formalizing the trade following the example of Kenya and Botswana. Take a look.
It may be surprising, but these South African donkeys have become a target for ruthless criminal gangs. That's because the gelatin in their skin is sought after in Chinese traditional medicine. 6 of Ikopoleng's 9 animals have been stolen.
The community is very angry. Wherever this happens, we call the police, but nothing comes out of it. They just come, but the case doesn't get to court. No one is arrested.
In South Africa, donkey-drawn carts have always been vital for making a living, but their hides had no value. Chinese demand for the gelatin in the treatment of anemia and menopause has changed that, increased the price of the animals 5-fold and led to a surge in theft and illegal slaughter.
Now we've found them slaughtering them, they will use a hammer, they'll hit it on the forehead or from the back of the atlas vertebrae or the axis, whereby it will fall down, and they will use a knife to slit the throat, which is inhumane. They cause suffering, and which is a welfare problem now, an issue.
The illicit industry is said to be worth millions of dollars. And with donkey numbers in China in decline, it's increasingly looking to Africa to satisfy demand. Kenya and Botswana already export donkey hides and meat to China, and Namibia is setting up to do the same. And now there are plans to formalize trade with South Africa too.
Yes, it might be a good idea, yes, but then only when it's executed correctly, when the breeding is done correctly, when the slaughtering is done correctly and humane. It's a good initiative whereby jobs will be created, whereby people will breed donkeys. Donkeys will be slaughtered in a humane way and will be exporting.
Recently, police have made several large seizures of hides, suggesting the donkey killings could be a growing trend. Their cause may not be as glamorous as preventing the poaching of rhinos, elephants or lions, but even these donkeys can no longer roam free.
Since they were introduced by Nestle in the 1950s, Maggi cubes have transformed cooking across the region, providing a boost to flavors that need a careful and often time-consuming juggling of herbs and spices. Local upstarts, though, are also getting a taste of the growing industry. It is fueled by the continent's demographic boom and a budding middle class who have more cash to spend on food and higher expectations when it comes to taste.
Mami Goya conjures up her version of the Abu Diola, a marinated fish and rice dish served with green sorrel leaves at a roadside eatery in Senegal's capital, Dakar. Her way of cooking, using traditional methods with a mix of shop-bought flavorings, is a demonstration of how cooking and shopping habits are evolving in West Africa.
This is garlic that I peeled earlier, mixed with green chili. I added salt and lemon, and I will mix it all and use it to marinate the fish, as you can see.
In Abidjan's five-star Pullman Hotel, Chef Loic Dablé prepares pepe soup, a spicy fish and vegetable stew. He flavors it with chili paste and sumbala, a fermented locust bean patty. Dablé says more and more people have turned to using stock cubes because they are quick flavor enhancer, but that in reality, they mask the real flavor of the food.
The cubes did not replace ingredients. The ingredients are always there. The cube just came as an enhancer. Usually, you make your stock, cooking it for 4 hours because you need to cook the crabs that go in it. Mix your spices or marinades, and now you no longer have to do that. You put water, Maggi cube, and tomatoes, and you'll have a pronounced flavor, and you'll think that the food is tasty. But really, all you are getting is a hint of salt and other things that will overwhelm your taste buds. But in my opinion, it remains superficial.
Some consumers have cut back on stock cubes because health experts say the salt in them can contribute to health problems. Health concerns aside, however, taste is still the bottom line for Lucy Tiehi, who sells braised chicken at an outdoor grill in Abidjan. She is sticking with Maggi cubes.
If a customer eats my chicken and finds it bland, he will go elsewhere.
Senegal limited the salt content of all cubes to 55% in 2017, the first country in West Africa to regulate their components after the World Health Organization published guidelines on salt consumption in 2012.
After nearly 2 decades in the doldrums, Zimbabwe's tourism sector is enjoying a rebound, with visitors returning in the droves to see the majestic Victoria Falls and explore unspoiled safari reserves. With Zimbabwe's economy still in tatters, an influx of tourists is expected to help bring in desperately needed revenue, with the sector already contributing around 10% to GDP.
This is Zimbabwe. And after almost 20 years in the doldrums, its tourism industry is being revived. Foreign visitors to the country's flagship tourist resort, the Victoria Falls, jumped nearly 50% in the first quarter of 2018.
We chose Zimbabwe because of Victoria Falls. I gotta tell you, we've never been to Africa and we're falling in love with Africa. So, yeah, we've seen a lot of animals and the people are so kind and friendly and welcoming. Yeah, we were not afraid at all to come here.
Political and economic instability scared tourists away for years. But after a de facto military coup at the end of 2017, longtime President Robert Mugabe was removed and an industry responsible for 10% of Zimbabwe's GDP reopened almost overnight.
I think we were in a closed period. For a long time, we closed ourselves in. The doors were locked. It is a key pillar to our economy and a low-hanging fruit. We just have to get our act together.
Even though it's too early to say exactly what the national increase for 2018 will be, the minister believes tourism could become the #1 contributor to Zimbabwe's economy, something local businesses are getting excited about.
The bottom line is we want to see more tourists, we want more people to come to Zimbabwe. Hopefully we will have more investors coming in to build more hotels, bigger hotels and other facilities.
And this seems to be exactly what is happening. New hotels and a new airport have recently been built close to Victoria Falls, and accommodation in the area is often fully booked. This man explains why.
It is impressive. I think it's one of the most impressive things I've seen in my life. And believe me, I have seen many things in my life already.
Whether regional or from further abroad, tourists are coming back, and Zimbabwe appears to truly be open for business.
On Africa Focus, we love hearing from you, so make sure you get interactive with us on our various social media pages. Remember, you can view this program along with our wide array of other programs on DSTV channel 268. On behalf of the entire team here on Africa Focus, thank you for keeping us company on this exciting of journeys. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.